C.S. Lewis had I think it was a commencement speech. He talks about doing the right thing with the people that you authentically connect with, and you end up in the place that you're supposed to be when you do that. If you're trying to get inside somebody else's circle and fighting and clawing for that, you're always unhappy. But I think faithfully living our faith and according to the values we have and being willing to put in the work leads you to a place where there's more peace, even if everything isn't like you expected. Because I think one of the things we've always said is whatever we're planning is probably not going to be the thing that happens. It almost always is something else.
This is the Act One podcast. I'm your host, James Duke. Thanks for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a good review. My guests today are producer Brady Nasfell and his wife, screenwriter Andrea Nasfell. Brady has produced feature films and television for Netflix, Sony, Lionsgate, Fox Sports, NBC, VH1, and Discovery Networks. Recent films include Mr. Manhattan, which is now streaming on Great American Pureflix, 4th of July, directed by comedian Louis C.K., and Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. Brady produced the Grammy Award-winning comedy special Sincerely Louis C.K., as well as comedy specials with Kevin James, Joe Rogan, and Tom Segura. Andrea Nasfell is a feature writer with over a dozen produced credits, including the television Christmas movies Every Other Holiday and Holiday for Heroes. She also is the writer of theatrical comedies such as The Resurrection of Gavin Stone and Mom's Night Out, which won a Dove Award for Inspirational Film of the Year. Andrea is a member of the WGA and teaches screenwriting at both USC and Asbury University. She is also an alumni of the very first Act One class. Brady and Andrea are an amazing couple, and we had a wonderful conversation that I know you will enjoy. Andrea and Brady Nasfell, welcome to the Act One podcast. It's such a joy to have both of you on today.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad to be here with you.
Longtime friends. I've known you guys for years. It's so exciting to have you guys both on here. We were just talking about how I got really excited when I found out that you guys had made a film together. Brady, a film that Andrea wrote that Brady produced. And so, but before we get to that film, there's a lot of things I want to spend some time talking to you guys about. And just to let people be aware. So, and Brady, I think I mentioned this to you a while back. When you guys first came to town, we were going to the same church, and I think we created something together. It was like a spoof on Survivor. This is how old we go.
Yes. Yeah. I saw that not that long ago when we were looking back through a bunch of old videos. It was.
We shot it in Griffith Park.
In Griffith Park. We shot a spoof. That was back when Survivor was brand new. So that tells people a lot of things. And I remember going to you guys' offices when you guys started your offices in Burbank. And we'd had meetings there about stuff. I can't remember who or why I was, because I wasn't always meeting with you guys. Shane was there, and I can't remember, but anyway,
we were all young and ambitious, and collaborating anywhere we could. It was a lot of fun during those years.
Yes. We ran, and we were young and run around doing all kinds of fun stuff. So anyway, I was just thinking about that. So actually, it would be fun to start there. Tell people a little bit about, here I've got a husband and wife team here who made a film together. I'd love to, and this is actually the second or third film you guys have actually collaborated together on.
I believe it's our second, as far as when it comes to Andrea having written it and me producing it.
Okay. So when I first met you guys had made a film together, right? And that's what kind of brought you out to LA. So why don't we start there? How did both of you guys kind of get into the business, and then what brought you to Los Angeles?
Well, we met in Kentucky at Asbury University. And from that point, we're thinking about moving to LA, but we ended up staying in Kentucky for a little while. Andrea wrote a script that I produced and directed there before we left. It was kind of like, we were trying to be professional as possible, but I think you look back and you're like, oh, that was a kind of a glorified thesis project. Do you know what I mean? and it taught us a lot of really great things. And I think one of the key things was the way you interact with people on set, the way you do business. All those interactions really are the biggest impact we're going to have on people. When I think prior to that, we thought we were going to tell a great story and it was going to impact the world. And that can be totally true. We hope it's true. But the way you conduct yourself day to day is so critical. And so that's where we started.
And had you made, so this is interesting though, like, so you made a feature film. Had you made a lot of short films prior to that, or because there's a lot of people listening to this going, wait, they just made a feature film? Like,
we had done student projects in college, but I don't know, we were just like young and ambitious enough to think, well, we'll just do it. How hard can it be, right? We shot on 16 millimeters, so we actually shot it on film.
Wow.
We couldn't afford to develop the film on a regular basis, so instead of dailies, we joked that they were monthlies. Ship them away and like have them all come back later.
What that really means is we didn't see anything we shot until after the movie was done.
Yeah.
And we were literally waking up every morning thinking, having nightmares really that we forgot some scene or something.
Wow. So for people who don't know, who are listening to this, because film is so rare these days, it's very, one of the reasons why film has fallen out of favor is because it's so expensive to shoot and process. And so, yeah, I can imagine if you're doing a low budget indie, it was in Kentucky, right? And so it's like, where are you even doing your telecine? You're sending it off, right?
Sending it to LA.
Yeah. Oh, you're sending it here and then have to be sent back. Oh, baby. Oh, yeah, that was expensive. So, so you guys had never done one before, and then did you just kind of pull the money together with family and friends, or is that how you financed everything? Yeah.
Yeah, we did the whole thing with a business plan. We did everything according to the book. I just studied a lot and, stumbled through it and learned a lot of lessons. So it was valuable in that sense. And then we realized, the kind of resources and the experience, the expertise that you need to make a really good movie. It's one thing to just get a movie made. A lot of people can technically do that.
Yep.
But the skill sets, the experience, all that stuff that you need, the kind of people you need to surround yourself with to do a really good movie.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. And you really can't usually do that without some resources more than we had,
Yeah.
So, and then we moved to LA not too long after that. And you're in a context where everybody you meet is writing a screenplay or making something, or they have all this amazing experience. And I think that was good for us to be here and get, into a place where iron was sharpening iron in a way that we had never experienced before. If you live in another part of the country or the world where you're the only filmmaker or there are only a few of you, you're just not getting the benefit of an environment like this, where it's like, wow, you're really going to learn a lot from people. And
you remember when we first came out, and one of the other things we have in common with you is the Los Angeles Film Studies Center.
That's right.
There was that creative accountability group.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Great.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't see people doing that anymore. I don't know where that idea came from, but that concept was, we were all young alumni of universities. We all picked up and moved to LA. We all had dreams, and it was all different. Like, we weren't all writers. Some people were directors, some photographers, whatever they wanted to do. And we would get together. I don't remember how often, but you just kind of had to report in, like what
monthly,
are you doing to advance your skills and your dreams
Yes.
this week? And then that whole group came together and made a short film together. But that was I should start advising my college students to do that more often now when they get out, because writers groups are easy. I'm always teaching writers, so it's easy for me to say you should get in the writers group, but it's not just for writers. I mean, that group was so foundational, and we made a lot of friends out of that group. We made a silly film festival for the alumni of the program.
Yep.
We did a lot of creative things together as just being right out of school, and I think it helped all of us. The ironing, sharpening iron things.
I completely agree with you. One of the most important skills any filmmaker can learn is how to collaborate, how to partner with other creatives and let the best idea win. Just learn how to work together. And when you're a young person who's just like, take every opportunity, take every opportunity you can to work with other people. And so, when you guys were starting out, so for you, Andrea, when you were starting out, did you have to create opportunities to write? Like, were you going up to people saying, "Hey, how were you developing your talent as a writer? Were you just coming up with ideas? I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to start writing what used to be popular back in the day was spec scripts." Were you doing a lot of that? Were you writing a lot of your own ideas? And even now to this day, what do you encourage young writers to do when they're just starting out? No one's hiring you. So what am I writing?
Right. So what brought us out here in '99? I was in the very first class of Act One, and then we moved.
The very first. So when I introduced Andrea to group, I said she's the original OG. Her and that group. Yep.
We were the guinea pig class, is what we call ourselves. They were just testing it all out on us, but it was amazing. And I made so many good friends in that group, and a lot of a number of them were here, and some of them came here, and so. A lot of that was just encouraging each other. What are you writing? And yes, I wrote a lot of spec scripts.
Can I interject something there? Because there are people from that original class who all wrote on a film we did a few years ago called Strong Father, Strong Daughters.
Yes.
And it turned out that one of the people in that original class, Amy Snow, wrote an original script. And as happens in this town, the other writers come in. And the next writer that was contacted was Claire Sarah. And so Claire's like, "Hey, Amy, by the way, and so Amy's like, "Great. Yeah, I know you'll do great things with it." So then Claire did some things. And then Andrea was contacted later. She ended up writing on it. And then
one people.
And I have this picture of them, all of them on the set, the three of the writers. Or wasn't one more, the director. But I have a shot with them on set. And it was a beautiful thing if you trace it all back to that original Act One class.
That's really cool.
Technically, Amy was in 01, but we'll still claim
we'll still take her.
She was still early enough to be it.
That's funny though, because that is how the business works. Fortunately and unfortunately, when people get rewritten and they get so the fact that you guys would know each other and you could actually talk to each other, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was fun. So we did like writing spec scripts. You asked what is my advice, and I say you still have to write spec scripts, because spec scripts, even though they don't get bought as much as they used to, they are still your sample so that you can get hired. And so you pretty much have to write them. And I think that it's obviously you're working out your own skills. I feel like you have to write a few scripts before you write a really good script. I would never show anybody the first screenplays that I wrote. But after, writing a few and taking classes and all of that, you start to refine your skills. And then it was actually my first job that I got. I guess we can transition into that. But the first paid gig that I got was because Kitty Buchholz, also from the class of '99.
Yep.
Amy was, I think. Anyway,
I bought a used car from Kitty.
Did it run?
It ran right into the ground. No, sorry.
No, I think we let someone borrow one of our cars to someone else from Act One. Melissa Darabian drove our car for a while. So I guess that was part of the Act One legacy. But Kitty knew these producers. I don't know how she had met them, but they were looking for someone to write a romantic comedy idea that they had, and she knew I had written one during our Act One class. And she said, "Oh, you should read Andrea's sample." And so there was my spec that I had written, and she, my fellow writer classmate, passed it off. I think that was one of the things that surprised me too. I was worried that it was going to be very competitive to come out and take classes with all these writers, and everyone was vying for opportunities. But it was that kind of the opposite, where everyone was like, "I know someone who writes that. I know who you need." And we all got each other a lot of work in those early days. It was great.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest differences I've seen working in this town, is that people genuinely want to help each other. If there's not a overly competitive, it's like sports necessarily. There are a lot of people are lifting each other up, particularly in the Act One community, I would say as well. So that script since we're here already, let's talk about it. So here you are. You came out here. You took the Act One program, and then you segued from that original Act One program into at the time we were offering like an Act Two type program, and you were at that particular project, you were developing this script, which is now called Mr. Manhattan, which is premiering on PureFlix. And I don't know when people are going to listen to this, but it's either now airing or soon to be airing on PureFlix, right? Like that was the script you were developing in Act Two.
So the producers were actually David White, who went on to found PureFlix.
Oh yeah,
but it didn't exist at the time.
Right.
And Jeff Peterson, and they had come up with a concept for an idea. Jeff had something that he wanted to make, and so they were looking for a writer to write their idea. And so that was the first experience that I had, was coming in and pitching a take. Like, this is what you want to do. Here's how I would do it. And they hired me for very little. I mean, they were just two guys putting their money together and, trying to make it happen, trying to make an independent film kind of thing. And I was going through the Act Two program where I needed to be working on a script. And so, I was very excited to just have a project. And then I had kind of another set of eyes on it because I was going through that program where they could give me feedback before I turned my draft in.
Speaking of, I don't want to skip past this for our audience. You had to pitch your take on a project in order to get hired. So can you explain that to our audience? So these producers, what is a kind of a standard practice? It doesn't always happen, but it's a pretty normal thing where a non-writing producer of some kind will have some sort of IP, or they'll have an idea or something, and they will, how do they interact with, say, a writer like you? Like, how does that become a writer for hire job?
So yes, so they will have, maybe they've optioned a book, maybe they own the rights to Legos or whatever it is that they want to make a movie about. Or in this case, it was a concept that they liked. A lot of times, I've written a lot of Christmas movies for television, and so they'll just say, pitch us some Christmas movie ideas. And so they already have a mandate of what they're trying to do, but they need someone to write it. And so, for example, with a book or with a toy or something like that, they'll have multiple writers read the book or research the topic or whatever, and then they will come in and say, this is how I would tell the story, or this is how I would adapt the book into a movie. This is what you need. This is what you don't need. I focus on these characters. You kind of give that a pitch of your version of the script. And I think the way that you get those projects usually, in my experience, is that you have a great idea, a great way into the material, but also you have a personal connection that you pitch to them. I've experienced this. I'm passionate about this. My family has experienced this, conflict or whatever it is that you're, that is the core of the story you're pitching. Yes, you have a good idea and you're good at storytelling, the building blocks of the story, but also you have a passion. Your personal voice and experience, it is a match for this project, and it's going to be the right one to tell the story. You're kind of pitching both of those things. I have a great idea, and here's why I'm the best person to tell your story.
And are you ever pitching an A, a B, or a C? Like, are you saying, oh, this way, or, kind of like when you're bidding for a job, high bid, medium bid, low bid, or are you coming in just with the one really strong opinion for this is the story I would tell. This is the angle I would take on that story.
Usually you want to come in with one really strong opinion. Yeah. And you might have a variation on a couple of beats in the story or something, but you want to come in really passionate about one idea and not coming wishy-washy about, well, it could be this or it could be that. They've probably already thought that themselves. So you want to come in with your really strong, it has to be this way. You're the expert, you're the writing expert. And so you want to, use that expertise and come in with one strong idea.
So was this called Mr. Manhattan back then?
It was.
Okay.
Mr. Manhattan from the beginning, which is unusual, actually. A lot of my movies have titles along the way, but this one was what they called it from the beginning.
And did it so when you pitched your take on their idea, how long did it take you to prepare? Did it take you, and I know you're having to think back here, but and typically how long does it take? A couple of weeks, a month, a couple of days?
It takes as long as they give you. whenever they
Good
want
answer.
to pitch, that's how long you have. And so sometimes it's a couple days. Sometimes you might have a month. If they're not rushing on it, it might be something you're just noodling in the back of your mind for a while, and then eventually you're like, oh, that's a great idea for that. This one I don't remember, because and I mean, the funny thing is, it was 20 years ago. It was 2003, and when we first started around, I think 2004, when I was really fully writing it. And so, here it is 20 years later when it finally gets made and released, which is pretty crazy, and I guess a testament to patience in the business. You never know what project's going to come back. We thought it was dead for years and years and years, and we tried to resurrect it at one point, didn't come back, and then Brady saw Jeff Peterson at an event and was like, hey, what about Mr. Manhattan? And Jeff was like, yeah, what about that? And we took another look at it, update. Of course, 20 years ago, it was out of date. It needed some changing. So we rewrote it.
Andrea had to, go back in and really update it. And, you talk about a 20-year-old script and you think, well, man, that's old material, right? Right. And I mean, it is. And I mean, I would say that I think the rewrite took about 3 months or so, and it was one of the most difficult rewrites she's ever had to do. The story was somewhat intact from the original. There are a lot of concepts that are same, but it was being adapted to a different distribution channel, right? Because it was not a faith-based movie initially.
Right.
And you don't want to take a concept like that and just slap in a few faith elements and call it a day. It's something I think Andrea has always been concerned about in any of her writing, that she's writing authentic characters. If it's in the faith-based space, then they have a real authentic faith journey. And that's what she had to really figure out to make Mr. Manhattan work in this space. So,
and usually when you're writing faith-based film from the beginning, then you engineer the theme that you're exploring into the whole structure of the movie and the character arc and all that. And so you're starting from the beginning, but to go back and kind of reverse engineer it can come off really false. And so I really didn't want that. And so we worked really hard to make the character journey really genuine, and the faith elements feel built in, even though they actually weren't from the beginning.
Awesome. So let's talk about the film. What Brady, give our audience, what's the film about, and what's the, what are they, if they're looking for this type of film, why would they tune in? It's not a horror film. We're not talking about an action adventure film. This is a romantic comedy, right? Or
it's more of a family drama.
Family drama. Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
is.
Sorry, family drama.
Good. And there's romance as a part of this. This is part of the question when you're making a movie, is figuring that kind of thing out. And honestly, there have been people in the process at very high levels of the project that have said, "Oh, this is a romantic comedy, right?" And you're like, "Well, no, not really," because we've thought so deeply about it.
Yeah.
Talking about that way too.
Yeah, it did.
That was when that you repeated it, because that's what I said, that Kitty said someone's looking for a romantic comedy, and they were. But then once we got into what the story was really about, the core relationship in the story is between a father figure and kids. So,
and one of the roles of a producer is deciding, how the team should be structured. Andrea is the best one to pitch this right now, since she's here.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Andrea, pitch your film to us. So what
honestly, if I were to say it, she would say, no, that's not right.
Yeah, I know. She'd correct you anyway. Yeah. So tell people about Mr. Manhattan.
So Mr. Manhattan, it's a story about a guy who is kind of an upwardly mobile lawyer in New York City. He's on the rise when he gets a call that his brother and sister-in-law have died in an accident, and he is the appointed guardian of their two children. And so he has to bring the two children into his New York life. He lives in a studio loft, and he works all the time, and he has to kind of adjust to life as a new uncle/father. But the romance part of it, the romantic comedy part of it that we started with, was that he has, it took a few different forms and different drafts along the way, but the movie that you'll see He has a fiance that he left behind when he went to New York. They broke off their engagement. And she has been the kids in the kid's life all this time that he's been gone, their babysitter, their kind of adopted aunt. And so when he needs help, the help comes in the form of her, which brings their past and their relationship back into his life. So that's where we get family drama with some
I like it. I like it. And so Brady, so she starts writing this, I think you said 2004, Andrea.
Yeah.
And so 20 years later, how does this film, why are we watching this film premiere now? Tell us, because you said, basically there was a time when, once again, for people who are kind of new in the list, projects come and go. They people write stuff that gets shoved into their drawers all the time and never see the light of day. Someone gets excited about it and then they never get made. What happened with this film that seemingly you guys thought was dead to now all of a sudden it's going to be premiering?
Once the script was written, actually, there was plenty of activity trying to pitch it. And I was involved, because I also knew a few people, kind of thing. That's, you're trying to reach out to wherever you can get in the door. And, I collaborated with the other producers for a bit. Then probably 10 years later, it kind of resurfaced. Andrea did a kind of a quick rewrite on it then. We went out to a few more people. At that point, I think I had done some kind of a shopping agreement with it, and I was just taking it out again. And that fizzled. And then once I was making Strong Father, Strong Daughters for PureFlix, this was, I think it released in 2022. And in the process of talking with everyone there, that's when I encountered Jeff Peterson again at the premiere of one of the other PureFlix movies. And I just, the moment I saw him, I was like, why are we not talking about this? It's perfect for this, And we just started talking again to PureFlix development people. And then, of course, David White is in the mix of that and making decisions. And he was thrilled to be revisiting an idea from the past. It's like, great, this is something we put our time and money into. Let's try to make a run at it. And once Andrea did the rewrite, it was pretty instant. People were like, yeah, let's do this. Interestingly, though, and I think this is one of the things, it's called Mr. Manhattan. And there was a time where it could have been shot somewhere else. And it's one of the moments that I felt very strongly about where it should be shot and all that, but you can't always make that happen economically. So that's why we ended up going to Kentucky, actually. We took advantage of their fairly new incentive program. And also Asbury University is there, where we not only graduated from there, but we made our first film there. But they also have an amazing soundstage, a couple of soundstages, a lot of equipment. And I mean, most people would be listening to this now saying, what? Kentucky? But if you go visit this place, you'll be like, wow, where did this come from?
It's legit. It's legit.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, the resources there, people in Lexington and, generally in places that don't get a lot of film, people are more friendly and helpful. And, the city of Lexington, Visit Lex, helped us out a lot with, just making connections. And it also made it possible to shoot for 3 days in New York City. So we shot in Central Park. We shot exteriors outside of Brownstones and, down by the Bull in the financial district and all of those things. And I've had people in the post process say, so what was it like shooting in New York? That must have been great. And I said, yes, we were there for 3 days, all exteriors, but it was a moment where it was important to try to make all the pieces fit to tell an authentic story. And, not everybody can tell if you're not shooting in New York. I mean, I guess, but a lot of people can.
Yeah.
And, and when you see certain things, like, they're in Central Park, you can't, that's that. Yeah. It's there. Yeah. So it was a really great thing to be able to pull all those pieces together. So after 20 years, there it
New
is.
York, New York skyline, little pieces like
Yes.
that. Yeah, those are $1 million shots. So when so I really am interested about the dynamic of a husband and wife working together on a project. Andrea, you've obviously written lots of other films that have been produced, and you've had, I'm sure, as you can share with our audience, both positive and negative experiences with production and producers, and Brady, you've made multiple projects at all different levels, where you've worked with all different kinds of writers who you're not married to, and one of the things that producers often do are things like give notes. So from both of you guys' perspective, and by all means, both of you can speak here. What was it like working together on this project? Were there moments when you guys had to decide, okay, we need a third party to come in here? Because for instance, you talked about the significance of the rewrite, right? So, how much of that were you pushing for versus was just coming organically from Andrea or from some of the other producers? And then even, just in the overall process, some people aren't fully aware of sometimes how little the writers are typically involved in production. Like sometimes writers only get invited to set and stuff like that. So just talk a little bit about the dynamic of working together.
I think that it went pretty smoothly. I mean,
well, you're still married, so
we're still good. We're still good. You didn't give me a ton of notes. I mean, you gave me feedback, but it wasn't a situation where, because we had the network is like the final say. So Brady could give input, but if the streamer had other ideas, then they were the notes that we had to listen to. And I mean, one of the challenges that was interesting in this project is that PureFlix and Great American merged right as we were about to go into production. And so then you had a whole nother studio come in with a whole nother batch of notes after we already had pretty much a greenlit script. And so we had to go back and take those things into consideration, which was interesting. And we had to do it all by May 1st.
Because of the strike.
And so you talked about being invited to set. I was invited to set, but I couldn't go.
No. That probably brings up the biggest conflict we had. That was the biggest project. Because as a producer and as a husband, I was really frustrated that I could not involve her in the way that I've always wanted her to be involved. If there's some script question or something that could be tweaked, for her to have input on it, and we couldn't do it. And I pressed her a little bit, like, oh, come on, this is, I'm your husband making this. But she was like, in solidarity with my fellow guild members, I need to stand down. And she did.
Andrea stood strong. You stood strong, Andrea.
Fun. I know, and our daughter is actually in it too. We made her audition, but
wow.
And so she has a little part in it. And so they were both out there in Kentucky, making the movie, and I was at home walking the picket line. Which was it was tough. It was sad a little bit. But so yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing that we had conflict over is, where are the lines and what can I do and what can't I do? And we just made sure that everything they needed done, production rewrites once they knew locations, all that, we made sure we got it done because the strike was looming. And from there, it was just on set. If they needed to figure something out, they had to figure it out.
Brady, you mentioned, so you guys were shooting, in the midst of, so she wasn't able to participate, obviously. But you're filming in Kentucky, most of it. And obviously, because you're shooting for a streamer, you don't have, a gazillion dollars to spend. You've got to be conscious of a budget for all different kinds of things. So help people understand the difference between, say, I'm going to go make an independent film, I'm going to go shoot my own movie, versus working for a studio or a streamer. What's the kind of the differences between producing independently versus producing for something that's going to be in-house? What are some of the things that you maybe you weren't aware of that maybe you learned, or some things that maybe you had seen or other people had warned you about? Not negatives, but just things to be aware of.
Well, the process of shooting for any company like a streamer or any kind of distribution company, and the funding is already in place, it takes a lot of uncertainty out of the process, and you can focus 100% on making the movie. When you're doing something independently, you're sometimes fielding calls to raise money during the making of the movie. I mean, you don't want to do that, but sometimes that's the way it goes. So I think there's something more focused about it. The process itself is very locked down, and the process, the legal side of it, the financial reporting, and there is a process you have to understand and follow if you want to have a good relationship with the studio or the streamer you're working for. So that was, I think I learned a lot of that by doing other kinds of projects, comedy specials and documentary series and different things like that. So applying that to film it's a similar thing, and probably one of the bigger surprises for first-time filmmakers is the process of delivering a movie. And it sounds so easy, just hand it off. But the legal requirements, all the legal documentation, all of the different elements to a movie, from sound deliverables all the way through different versions of the movie, those are all things that are really locked down and very specific when you go into a situation where distribution is in place. And if you're an independent filmmaker and you know what you're doing, obviously you're planning for all that as well.
But yeah, you've got a checklist though that you have to.
Exactly.
I learned about deliverables, the hard lesson. I learned that hard lesson myself many years ago. So you have this. Essentially, you have this. Not an investor, but essentially you have the distribution plan in place. So okay, my film is going to fit onto their platform, and so when the in a typical, let me just say typical, in a typical process, right? The director would get, let's say, 10 weeks to sit and edit on their own before the producers come in. What was the process like for Mr. Manhattan? When were you involved with post-production versus when is the network, or I keep saying network, I don't, what's the right term, streamer, studio, I don't know.
It's both in this case. So
but what's the it's Great American Pure Flix, basically, right? Yeah,
that's right.
And so they're all of those things. What break it down for us a little bit in terms of the post-production process, in terms of, because I was actually just having, the reason why I asked, I was just having a conversation where someone asked me, what does a creative producer do versus a non-creative producer? Yeah. So can you kind of walk people a little bit through in terms of what the post process was in your involvement with this film?
Well, I think there's something very important to be said about the structure and setup of post and thinking it through well in advance. And experienced filmmakers do this, right? So, but for anyone newer coming in, you can easily be caught up in just, casting and, is it raising money? Is it, getting all the team to shoot the movie? But really thinking through the post process all the way through the end. So, having a post supervisor, for example, that knows what they're doing is a key hire. So I think I focus on that a bit, even if I'm in a more creative role, which I was in this project, because I want to make sure everything is ready and in order and smooth for people when they come in and they're ready. And part of that for me is always wanting for the footage to get into the process immediately. And this is happening naturally more and more because we're all digital, obviously, but you can still have hiccups if you don't plan it well. So how fast it's a question I have. How fast can I get this into the editor? Mm-hmm. Because they're going to be able to start their work, right? But then they also can give us feedback if anything's going off the rails in any kind of way. Technically, we can make little adjustments. Obviously, you can look at dailies and all that stuff too. But then, once we're done shooting, the editor gets their time to assemble a cut, and then the editor or the director can come in. And I've found with these kinds of projects, it's pretty variable. I've had on one more extreme side of it, I've had a director who was also editing with another editor, and they were completely immersed in post through the entire process, all the way through, not only listening to a sound mix, but like the nitty-gritty details, right? Some directors are very much like that. They want to see all the details and be a part of that. And then there's the other side where they're really more looking at big picture story notes and not so immersed in the details. And there's nothing good or bad about either of those, but you have to know who you're working with and what their preferences are. And as a producer, I also think it's important for me to stand back and not try to be, I shouldn't be anxious about seeing anything or being involved with that process, because you need to be objective, I think. So sometimes a director or editor will ask your opinions about things. That's fine. But I like to stand back and let them do their work and then come in. And, sometimes when it gets to the point where there's a producer's cut, or I mean a director's cut, and I come in and I have notes, it can be very, very quick because they have refined it to a certain degree. And in other cases, everybody knows there's a little more work to do. It's not because they didn't do a good job. It's just a difficult
Right.
story. Or maybe in this case with Mr. Manhattan, we had an abundance of material. So we were running pretty long. I mean, the first cut of the movie was well over 2 hours, and that's too long in this case. And so we were working through, how do we tighten this up, and what's the most essential part of the story that we're telling? And the collaboration on this was great. Even though it's all remote in some of these cases, it works very well.
Andrea, help people understand, what is it like to have written and rewritten something for all those years, and then once it's shot, like you've handed it over, like you don't. So now people are chopping things up and moving things around. Just what is that like? Both good and bad, like, or maybe it's all bad. I don't know. But what is that like realistic? Because you've experienced this a lot now, writing something and then watching something that you wrote. What's it like? Is it difficult for you to see changes that are made or things like that, or have you come to appreciate the way other filmmakers bring something to the table that you kind of initially created?
Mm-hmm. Well, they say that the edit is like the final rewrite, because you're cutting and moving and you can change. We had one film where they re-edited the final scene and it changed the meaning of the entire movie, and that
Wow.
really had a huge. I didn't write that one, but it just had a huge impact on me. Like, wow, that's how much they can change something just by the way they cut something together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. Things are never. It's always hard for me to watch the cut the very first time, because, and many times I'm not there. Maybe I was there for part of it, but I only saw certain scenes, but I didn't see a lot of them. And so you have to erase the movie in your mind's eye that you wrote, because you directed it in your head. You had locations in your brain that you were imagining. And so you have to kind of say, okay, that's not what they chose, or not what they could get. A lot of times, it's not that they weren't trying to follow what you wrote, but it was just like, we have to shoot it here because of time or money, whatever.
Yeah.
And so you have to erase the movie in your mind's eye and replace it with the movie that exists. And I usually have to watch it at least once, to just do that. And then I can start like settling into, looking at what they're doing. And of course, with this particular project, because we're married, I was able to see so much more of the cut happening. Most of the time they just spring the whole movie at once. And so I was able to see, scenes and stuff happening in my house, from day to day. But I try also not to give a lot of input, or because people are experts at what they do, like the director, Brian Hertzlinger, he knows what he's doing. And so he's creating moments, he's shooting it a certain way because of his experience. and editors are cutting scenes together, you know, in a certain way because of their experience or because of what they got or what they couldn't get. And so maybe it can't go exactly the way I imagined it because, you know, you can only edit what you shoot is the famous saying. And so, you know, you're working from what you did. I was very happy with this movie. I've definitely had movies where I was disappointed by certain things, you know, in the end, but mostly when things on very low budgets, when things don't work out, an actor isn't great, or they have to start cutting important things that shouldn't be cut because of that, then you lose a big chunk of the story and it looks bad on you. Like, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I think, well, there was a whole subplot with this actor that wasn't great.
That's funny.
So that's when it gets disappointing. But in this case, like everyone was we had really, really good actors on this show. And
I would say also that, you know, Brian Herzlinger is someone that Andrea had met because he directed another film she wrote, Christmas Angel, and they had met on set, and she was telling me about him and how he was on set, just the way he ran things on set and the way he collaborated. And we were considering different directors, and I called him because Andrea had that experience with him, and it turned out to be just an amazing experience. He's a really amazing collaborator, and when you have someone like that who's not a diva, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He has a strong opinion, and he's a professional. He's good at what he does, but he doesn't hold his opinion above everybody else's. He's like, well, let's make the best movie we can make.
Yeah.
And that extends then to Carlos and Alexa PenaVega, who came on board, and you know, they really added such an amazing dynamic. I had not worked with either of them before, and I have to say I'm just so happy with their performances. I mean, they were incredible to work with in person. And sometimes when you find you like someone in person, then you watch something later, you're like, oh, I like them as a person, but they're not. So these guys are amazing. And, you know, Carlos plays a guy that is not so emotional. He's a more cerebral, and that comes across obviously in the way he performs his role. Alexa is the one carrying the kind of the heart in some ways of the movie. And I have to say, there are just moments I'm watching her and I'm like, wow, how do we get so fortunate to have her in the movie? The both of them, but they're both doing the parts. And that's a part of the collaboration with Brian, him recognizing that, tweaking little things here and there. And then you have Tate Webb, who came in to edit the movie, and Scott Popchez, who did the kind of final pass because of some scheduling conflicts. And you just get something that's really beautiful, something you can be proud of.
That's awesome. And I love that. I love the once again, the collaborative nature of filmmaking, where everyone's bringing their best to the game in their particular aspect. Andrea, you've made numerous films now. You've written numerous films. I'm curious, as a screenwriter, what is maybe one of the best notes you've ever received, and maybe one of the worst? I'd be curious to know, and if you would talk a little bit about how important notes are for the screenwriter. And Brady, I want to follow up with you about giving notes as a producer. But for you, Andrea, what's maybe the best note you've ever received on a script? And then what's maybe one of the worst, and why?
That's a tricky question. So one of the worst ones is easy. Be funnier. That's just okay. That's a very hard note. And
be funnier. That's
funnier. Could this be funnier? Could make this funnier. And so we could talk about that for a long time, but it's those notes that are not concrete, I guess, is how you could file that away into, like, I don't know how to accomplish that. No, whereas you could say, we would like some more physical comedy in this area, or like what do they mean specifically about it needs to be funnier? So just those kind of more overarching generic notes are harder. I've worked with some really great people, and especially in recent years, and working with a team now, and I wish I had written down the quote of the way he said it, but I think one of the notes that's very common to get as a screenwriter is you're always getting pushed to get into act 2 sooner, make act 1 shorter. Can you get the inciting incident earlier? And you really need, I fully believe that you really need some time in act 1 to show the character's ordinary world, so that you understand why the inciting incident of the film is an inciting incident. Why is this a big deal to them? If you don't know them and know what their world is like, you don't know why this bomb just dropped on their life. And then you need a minute for them to adjust to it and then get into act 2. And, as scripts get shorter, of course, act 1 will get shorter. But this producer that I was working with said, if act 1 is working, then 30 pages isn't too long. And if act 1 isn't working, then 15 pages isn't short. He was basically saying, like, the page count isn't about it, it's how those things are working together.
Yeah.
And you won't feel it. You can have a 30-page act 1, and if it's really working and you're setting up the character and you're engaging the audience and you're creating suspense and you're causing a big ruckus with your inciting incident, then the audience is going to love it. And they won't care that they don't cross the threshold into act 2 until a few pages later, right? So the bigger note when people say that they want to get into act 2 faster is usually, oh, there's something wrong with act 1. It's not page count. It's, it's the effectiveness of what you're doing with the pages you have. And I just thought that was so smart. And he said, I wish I had written down exactly the way he said it, because it was just like a snappy, like, bumper sticker way of saying it. And I was like, I'm going to remember that always.
But that's still pretty good,
Yeah, it was a really good note.
Yeah. So what should be a writer's relationship with notes? Should they be adversarial towards them? How do you view note sessions? What should the writer's relationship be in that situation with notes?
So, I mean, I fully believe that I don't believe that I'm like an artiste, an auteur. Like I'm working on a team, and we're creating a product. We're artisans, we're creating a beautiful table and chairs set, say. And so if the customer needs it to be a little shorter so it will fit in their dining room, then you can't just be like, well, the 12-foot table is what I believe in. It doesn't matter. They need the 8-foot table to fit in their room. And so, if, especially when you have a studio streamer, whoever, and they have a mandate, they know their audience. If they're giving you notes, there's a reason. They know who they're delivering the script to, and they know what their needs are. And I feel like, honestly, that's one of the reasons why I've been able to work repeatedly for the same people, is that I'll listen to their mandate and understand it and deliver them what they're asking for. And that doesn't mean it's not creative and you're not artistic. It just means that there are parameters that you're working with, and you understand how to deliver something artistic and wonderful within those parameters of what they need.
So it isn't necessarily that a note is a quote unquote good note or bad note. It could be one that you some are maybe more challenging than others to make work. Would that be a better way of saying it?
I think so. And I think, some people, some executives are very smart with story, and they understand what your challenge is as a writer. And some executives know more about marketing and what their people are going to buy, and they don't know how to tell you how to incorporate that into the story, but they know, like, our audience is going to be offended if there's, a gun in the scene or whatever. And so then we have to write that out, and they can't brainstorm ideas with you of how to rewrite the scene, to rework it. But some executives will be able to. And so it just depends on sort of what they're better at. But I think one thing is, it's always hard. Like you want it to be perfect and you want them to love it, but there's always going to be notes. And if they're delivered well, I mean, some people are better at delivering notes than others,
Right.
like the way they say them.
No doubt.
You could really crush a writer by the way that you deliver notes. And it's honestly, I wish more executives knew that how counterproductive that is, because you crush a writer and then say, why, why'd you do this such a bad job? Then they go home and they have to recover for 2 weeks before they can start writing. On the other hand, if you deliver the notes in such a way, like, let's think about this, or we would like to go more in this direction. We really liked what you did with this scene. Could you give us more of that over here? If you deliver the notes that way, then the writer is like ready to go home and start working on it because they're inspired and they feel like they're a part of the process instead of being demeaned. So I think there's always going to be notes, how they're delivered and and you just have to develop a tough skin, in order to accept some of the hard ones sometimes, because it's going to happen. But I do think that there's a little give and take where the way they're delivered could help the writer continue on faster and better in the process. Brady's not.
Well, I was just going to say one thing that I think it's psychologically helpful to take 15 minutes to hate the notes. I'm stealing this from my friend Rick Pendleton, a DP.
I love it.
You get some note and you're just like, you just spent all the time painting something this way or doing something in a different direction. And I think it's actually really helpful. Just take your minute or 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it takes.
A day.
Hate it a day.
A day.
And that's true.
On set, you can't take a day.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really, actually, I think that's really helpful advice. Because like you said, you've put all that work into it. And so many younger writers, newer writers, are afraid of notes, or they get adversarial, and they don't work. You'll learn very quickly. You won't work long if that happens. Yeah. And, but at the same time, you wrote it because you thought it was good, or you thought it worked. And suddenly it no longer works because they want you to go a different direction. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it no longer works in the same way you thought it worked. But take time to digest that. Brady, for you, you're hearing Andrea talk about it from a screenwriter's perspective, and you're sitting there biting your tongue. Just right. No, just kidding. No. As a producer, what do you, how do you see your role in note giving? What's your strategy for note giving? And what's maybe some good and maybe even some negative experiences you've had in the process?
Well, I can tell you that being married to a writer has made me much, much better at communicating.
Yeah, that's a cheat code. You got a cheat code.
Well, and I mean, I think honestly, if you imagine that the writer's your friend and somebody you want to have a long-term relationship with, then you probably talk to them differently, right? And I think I've learned the most about note giving from her writers group, actually. Andrea's been in a writers group for about 25 years, 24 years. And one of the things they do when they give notes to each other is they start with the circle of love, right?
Jack Gilbert
founded this writers group.
There you go. Well, and it's helpful in every part of your life if you're commenting on anything. Like,
well, can you just? I'm sorry, Brady, I didn't mean to go. But Andrew, can you just explain the circle of friends real quick?
So circle of love, and I'm teaching and I implement this in my workshops too. We all do circle of love. So you start out and you go around the whole circle. Everyone says what they like about it, what they think is working, what's really good. And what that does for you as a writer, it's helpful to know what's working as well as what's not working. Because if you don't know what people like, you might cut it. And then next time they're like, oh, I like that. And you didn't tell me. So I didn't, in the rewrite, I got rid of that. But it helps you to also kind of feel like, okay, this isn't a complete failure. There's things that are really working about it. And here is what they are. And you hear it from everyone. And sometimes you might have to say, this 12-point courier is beautiful. And when you hear that in Circle of Love, then you know to brace yourself that it's going to be a bad day. But usually there's a lot more. Usually there's something else. And it also forces you, I think, with my students, because every once in a while I'm like, what are they going to say for Circle of Love? Like, this was a rough rough week for this or whatever. But they'll find something. And I really appreciate that too, because especially as a teacher, I'm like, we're trying to help them get better. Right. So I'm sort of more focused on what's wrong with it. And I hear the other students say, I really like this about it. In this moment, I was really engaged. And I love to hear that too. And so that's what we do. We go around the circle, everyone says what they love, and then we go into notes. And then at the end, we wrap up by encapsulating, like, this is the one final comment, like the one thing either you didn't get to say, or the best note you got today was this. And so when you walk away from an hour's worth of people, blah, 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 about your script, you have kind of an organized, like, these are what they thought were the priorities at the end. So
that's awesome.
So now,
all right. So Brady, so back to,
it has informed my philosophy, strategy, or whatever on notes. And first of all, is looking for things that really work. I mean, not that you have to always look. It's sometimes it's very obvious what's working. But the other thing is, when I don't know if I'm right about a note, right? I just can give my impressions and my thoughts. And I think what I'm getting at really is tone. That the way you say things. I use the word consider a lot, or let's think about what can we explore this option, or you can say a moment isn't hitting for you. There are different things you can say without being, this sucks, which is what a writer's going to hear very easily in your notes. What you're wanting to do is give them what they need to improve it. And if you're stepping all over them and criticizing it in a really negative way, it's hard to get that sense of feeling that I want to do this. So it's more about, let's work together and try to find the improvements we can find. And I'm sure that no one's perfect at giving notes, because there's no way you can't manage someone's emotions about this stuff. You don't know it will get someone upset, but I think you can really speak kindly and constructively.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is interesting is that producers also get notes.
Yeah.
So when you're on the end of the process, the distributor, whoever, is giving notes on the cut, which the producer's been fairly involved in. And so, at every stage of the process, someone is giving someone notes. Maybe the producer's giving the writer notes, and the director may too. But then at the end of it, the director and the producer are getting notes from the studio on how the cut comes out at the end. So everyone is on the receiving and giving at, both ends of it at different times.
Yeah, that's true. And, it reminds me of another thing about notes. It's helpful for writers to get condensed notes. If you have a bigger team of people, for the conflicts in the notes to be worked out a little bit in advance.
Yes.
Because there have been times Andrea's gotten notes and it's like, they're all over the place, and then you're just lost. You literally, the notes contradict each other.
Yeah. And
so that's one thing. The other thing is that I try to avoid having notes get down the chain that don't need to. So if we're getting notes from a studio executive or a development person, I will sometimes interact with them on notes that I think I want to try to deal with before they get back to the writer, because I'm like, I know what the writer's trying to do here. It's part of our discussions. Let's clarify this. And sometimes I can filter out a few things that the exec says, oh, I get what you're doing there. Okay, great. Or in some other cases, they're like, no, we really have to do this one. And then I can prepare the writer to say, look, this is something the network has to have. So let's try to figure out how to make it work. Right.
Yeah, that's really smart. Brady, you've worked a lot in different types of filmmaking. So you've done a lot of sports stuff. You've done a lot of stand-up specials, as well as narrative feature films. I'm curious, just kind of looking at all the stuff you've worked on, you've done a lot of stand-up specials. You've produced a lot of stand-up specials. What's the similarities and differences between producing narrative film versus all these others?
Yeah, I won't probably be comprehensive here, but I would say that forming a team of people to do the project is very similar. you're finding the best people for each of the roles, and that changes from project to project. I mean, with comedy specials, design and lighting and the DP, those are kind of the critical pieces. The stand-up, the comedian is going to be driving the show creatively, and their act is what it is. So a director, in that case, they're helping compose, making sure the shots are composed. They'll have their input or whatever, but it's more centered on the comedian. So we're emphasizing different roles more in our process of hiring. And then when you get into narrative, you are dealing so much. I mean, I have a huge amount of interaction over the story itself. And then you get into the casting part of it, which is obviously huge. I mean, with Mr. Manhattan as an example, we have 2 kids in the movie, and we went through many, many rounds of trying to find the right kids. And we would find one boy. We found the boy right away, and then we were trying to find the girl to match. And we found amazingly talented girls that we would have hired, but they weren't. There was something like they were as tall as the same kid as the older brother, and so you go through these processes of really scrutinizing and trying to get the right feeling and the fit, because it does only really take one actor to not quite be right. They might be an amazing actor, but just not quite fit, and I think it can disrupt the balance, and just. I think the scrutiny that you give to that process is obviously on a different level when you're not doing casting in some of these other projects. I would say that the other dynamic is the director, and as a producer, I love to work with collaborative people across the board. That's the way I operate, and I think that when you have talented people, you sometimes get people that are a little stronger with the way they want to do something, and I adapt to that. That's what you have to do, and you have to know what you're getting into. But I would say that's a difference between like feature films and then say something more in television, where a writer is more obviously the EP to the show or something, or in documentary filmmaking when you're chasing a story that kind of unfolds, that type of thing.
The editor becomes one of the most
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's a great point. So you've actually worked, Brady, with Louis C.K. a lot, and there's a gem of a little film that probably not enough people saw because of the unique way that you guys made it and distributed it. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your involvement in Louis' film, The 4th of July. Well, first of all, tell people a little bit what it's like working with him, and then how did you get involved in 4th of July, and what was that like?
Well, I produced 2 of Joe Rogan's specials, and through that relationship, I was connected with Louis. And I think most people that know his history know about the challenges he's had in the public space. And when we were approached to do his special first, it was right before the pandemic that we actually filmed that. I didn't know as much of the details about all that. And so I did kind of a deeper dive into finding out, about that, and talked with a really respected manager, a female manager that I work with quite a bit. And I said, here's the situation. What do you think, about working with Louis? Because I didn't know him at the time. And she said, I think everybody deserves a second chance. Everybody is worthy of that. And I know there's just a lot of feelings around this, and it's a challenge. But we opted to say, we're not doing this because we need another job. Honestly, it wasn't about like desperation financially or something. It was more about, here's somebody that is in the industry trying to do their thing, and we all make mistakes, right? And we really decided we would dive into it. And I'm telling you, from the time I started working with him and his someone that works with him that's close, I was instantly happy to have become a part of the team. And it wasn't long after we did the first special that we were talking one time, and Louis said, "Hey, would you take a look at the script? Would you be interested in producing this film I want to do?" And he and Joe List had written the screenplay in literally a short period of time. And I read it and I was like, this is wonderful. It's very gritty. It will offend some people, but it had a redemptive kind of storyline in it that I really appreciated. And after the movie was released, I had many people say, I so related to this guy's experience, dealing with kind of rejection from his family and being an artist and dealing with alcoholism and dealing with family, like in different places that don't think the way you think, right? They might not be so sophisticated and so in to understanding culture so much.
It's a deeply personal film.
Yes.
And
Yeah. And he has a very distinct vision, very clear vision for what he's doing. But he was the most respectful, kind, generous person. Here's an example, and I think it's cool to say this. After we did the first special, we shot it days before the pandemic and the shutdown happened. And I flew home actually sick. I thought I had COVID. I didn't. But literally everything shut down. And about 3 weeks later, he contacted me and said, "Hey, let's do something for the crew." And we ended up paying the crew again on that special.
wow.
And it was a time when obviously people were understanding how deep the devastation was going to be economically.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciated that. He really looks out for people. And I know people aren't going to, some people are not going to want to forgive him or whatever. But I just have to say, I've never spoken about this publicly. And I just think that he really cares for people and everybody, no matter what the circumstances are. The worst person in the world is worth something, has value, has sacred. I'm sorry, kind of getting emotional about it because I think people judge each other so harshly. And it's one of the ways that people of faith can make a difference is being there through thick and thin, being loving and kind and accepting of people. You have to make judgments on things. Obviously, you can't just do anything, but you also can be an encouragement, a support, be a good person, and that can be helpful to people.
And I tell a story about how that was rewarding in the end, because we went through a lot of things over our time between, our early days, and then we had kids. We, there was a couple strikes, through all the process. There's been a lot of ups and downs financially. It's very expensive to live in here. We're obviously, in these project by project things. And so Brady ended up for a while of his career kind of taking this diversion into basically sports documentary, doing a lot of UFC and some, different kinds of sports doc. And there was a point in time where he was like, this is not my heart. Like, I want to be doing features. Like, this is what I came out here to do. And, he's earning money for our family and supporting us, but it just wasn't, he was always thinking, why did I get off on this tangent? But through doing the UFC things, he met Joe Rogan because Joe's, working in that arena as well as doing comedy specials. So he stepped over into the comedy specials because of Joe. But then because of Joe, he did a lot of other comedy specials and met Louis. And because of meeting Louis, he did another feature. And for me, it was like I could see him being faithful and doing the things that God put in front of him, the next thing to do, and taking care of our family and, doing the best job he could with whatever it was that he was doing, which is why Joe Rogan says, "Hey, do my special," which is why Joe says, "Hey, you should have Brady produce your special." And so because he was doing the best he could in those moments, that thing that was the desire of his heart to be back into features came back around in the weirdest kind of way. You wouldn't ever say like, oh, you want to get into features, you should do some UFC sports documentary and it'll take you right there. There's no easy track in this, or clear track in this business anyway, but that was a very roundabout way to get back to features. And then from there, that's pretty much, what you've done. You do a comedy special here and there, but like you did Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and then Mr. Manhattan, then it's like you're back in features again in this, crazy roundabout fashion.
It's really a beautiful thing to think about. I tell people all the time, whether it's in Act One or just when I take people out to coffee or whatever, and they want to pick my brain, I'm like, look, work begets work, begets work, begets work. Like if it's not going to physically hurt you or other people, take the job, because when you take the job, you meet other people, you build relationship with other people. It's an opportunity to, as producers, to serve. And then in doing so, you build relationship with people that it may or may not lead to other opportunities, but that is traditionally how a lot of the work in this town gets made, is people work with somebody and they either refer you or they take you with them to the next project, and they just keep, and that's just typically how and what I love what you're saying, Brady, and Andrea is so sweet. She's such a sweet wife right there. But but it's like hearing your heart. You're doing the work, but what I hear, I'm just listening to you talk, and I'm just going, man, this guy loves people. He just wants to help people, but you don't get the opportunity to help people at that level, giving them second chances and things like that, and help until basically you're good enough to. Does that make sense? Like your skills, you developed your competencies, and that's what we all do. And I think that's what I want people to hear coming away from it is, if you want an opportunity, you've got to take the opportunities, right? Like if you want to eventually be the one that can afford to give people second and third chances, take the opportunities to develop your competencies and grow. And whether it's as a screenwriter or a producer or a director or whatever. So anyway, I just thank you for sharing that.
I think that's right. I was going to say one thing is that it just takes longer than you think it's going to take, which is a challenge. We had some friends when we first moved to LA. They said, yeah, I'm going to come out for a year or so, maybe two, and see how it goes. And at the time we were like, okay, but then they were, we were here 5 years. We had friends that were leaving after 5 years, and you're like, okay, they've been here long enough to know if it's going to work for them, if they want to do this. But, you need a 5 or 10 year outlook to think that you're going to be in this business.
That's right. Yeah. Andrea knows we have the 10-year rule. We talk about it Act One, minimum. So I want to get you guys out of here with this. This has been a great conversation, and I really hope people get a chance to check out Mr. Manhattan. When you guys, but I'd like for both of you to answer this question. What, now that you guys work in the business, you guys have accomplished a lot in the business. You're also husband and wife. You have children. You're seeing your children kind of grow up. All this. I'm curious. To the young person who's listening to this podcast, they're maybe thinking about moving out to Hollywood. Maybe they're not married yet, or maybe they're just married. What does success actually look like to you guys? Can you define success for the Nasfells? Like for Andrea, can you define it? Brady, what does it look like for people who are going, oh man, is success winning an Academy Award? Is success being able to own a house in Malibu? Is success, getting an agent? I don't know. Like I'm 20 something years old. I'm thinking about what does success actually look like as followers of Jesus?
What first comes to my mind is faithfulness. And it's maybe not that sexy to say that, but the truth is, at the end of the day, if you're not following what you think is right and living authentically in that, and really putting in the work to live authentically in that faith, then you're not likely to end up in the right places. C.S. Lewis had a I think it was a commencement speech. And I'm going to forget the name of it. It had to do with Circle of Friends, the Inner Circle. Yes. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he talks about doing the right thing with the people that you authentically connect with, and you end up in the place that you're supposed to be when you do that, living into your strengths, living into your relationships. And if you're trying to get inside somebody else's circle and fighting and clawing for that, you're always unhappy. And I've experienced a little bit of that. I think there's an instinct inside of us to want to get ahead, to take shortcuts and all that stuff. But I think faithfully living our faith and according to the values we have, and being willing to put in the work leads you to a place where there's more peace, even if everything isn't like you expected. Because I think one of the things we've always said is whatever we're planning is probably not going to be the thing that happens. It almost always is something else.
That's right. That's right. That's funny.
I think that's absolutely true. We really strive to make something happen, and then that would fall apart, and we get a phone call the next day, some random person that's like, "Would you like to take this job?" And we're like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's what we're doing." That has definitely been a pattern. I mean, I think looking at it, after being out here almost 25 years, it's your definition changes. You come out here to kind of change the world and win the Oscar and all those things. And then you just realize like what actually being in those kind of positions, what that life looks like. And you have to decide like at what cost, I mean, there's probably a lot of things that we could have done. There's an early job that you could have taken that would have meant you were away from me and our baby, Emma, at the time, maybe months at a time. And you might be working at a big studio right now because that job was on a track where that could have happened. But that was a fork in the road, where we said that's not what we want. At what cost do you want that job?
I would like to know my daughter.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and so you have to make those decisions. And I feel like it's very hard to define success because it's different for different people. But I think for us, I'm so happy with how our family has turned out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Even raising kids in LA, and I'm so proud of them. So proud of who they are. And I think that's one of the fears that people had when we moved out here, where would you raise your kids, and it's like, you know what? They're strong. They're strong kids, and they know what they believe, and they're talented. They're here in a competitive place where they have to step it up. Like it's been great to be together and to raise them here, because that's one of the places where we're like, we will be successful here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if it means we won't be as successful, as far as fame or something like that. We're doing the things that we love and what we're good at. And I feel like that's success.
That's beautiful. Both those answers were beautiful. And I wish people would be open and honest and talk about this more, because I think that the more realistic and honest we are with ourselves and with others, I think it creates a more realistic picture and a more honest picture for those who are going to come after us of the work that really has to be done, which is, look, let's make great movies. Let's tell great stories. Let's make great television, but let's be great people when we do it. Let's live great lives doing that. Like, let's treat people with dignity and respect. Let's lift up Christ's name with how we act on set, how we act in our neighborhood when we pick our kids up from school. Like, those things don't stop and start just because of, and just hearing, you guys are and I just want to say this, here we are publicly. So all three people who are going to listen to this podcast, you guys have such a wonderful reputation in town. Everyone who knows Brady and Andrea Nasfell speaks of you guys with such just a joy, and they speak of you guys with just such a sense of knowing your integrity, both of you guys. And so as a couple, you guys carry that, but also as individuals, people who have worked with you guys, just speak to just your integrity and your character, the way you guys have carried yourselves. And so I thank you for not only your friendship and your support of Act One and everything, but I just thank you for being the type of individuals that we want to see replicated out here. And just thank you for all you guys have done, and congratulations on Mr. Manhattan coming out. What an exciting kind of fun thing for a husband and wife to be able to do together. And congratulations on all the other projects you guys have got going on. And thank you for spending some time with me today. You know, a lot of what Act One is to this day is because of a lot of what you've done, Andrea. So thank you so much.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That means a lot to us. We appreciate it.
I always like to close by praying for my guests. Would you guys let me do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we just want to pause and stop and thank you for Brady and Andrea. Thank you for not only their relationship with you, but their relationship with each other, and the way they have carried themselves just by not only the art that they have created, the work that they have created, but the way in which they have treated others, the way in which they have been a blessing to every room that they've walked into, and how they leave people feeling better when they walk out of it than when they first walked in. God, thank you for using them to carry your name into all these different rooms. God, thank you for just the chance that we've had to talk today. And I pray, God, that this conversation would be an encouragement to so many who listen to it. And I pray, God, that you would bless everything they've got going on in their lives. I pray you'd bless their marriage, you'd bless their relationship with their children, you'd bless their job opportunities. And we look forward to more amazing projects. Maybe even husband and wife do all kinds of films that they'll make together. I don't know. We'll see. But God, we put all that at your feet, and we just thank you for this time. We pray this in Jesus' name, and your promises we stand. Amen. Thank you for listening to the Act One podcast. Celebrating over 20 years as the premier training program for Christians in Hollywood, Act One is a Christian community of entertainment industry professionals who train and equip storytellers to create works of truth, goodness, and beauty. The Act One program is a division of Master Media International. To financially support the mission of Act One, or to learn more about our programs, visit us online at act1program.com. And to learn more about the work of Master Media, go to mastermedia.com.